Fleet Admiral Krax-Vorn stood before the Supreme Galactic Council, his forearms trembling. Not from fear, no, from pure, undiluted rage. His usually vibrant purple skin had faded to a sickly lavender, and the ceremonial medals that once proudly adorned his chest armor had been stripped away, leaving only empty mounting points. Behind him, a holographic display showed the pathetic remainder of what was supposed to be the greatest invasion force in the history of the Zendari Empire, 17 battered ships limping through space. Esteemed members of the Supreme Galactic Council, Krax-Vorn began, his voice dripping with sarcasm so thick you could spread it on toast. I stand before you today to report on our wildly successful conquest of the primitive planet designated Sol 3, locally known as Earth, and by wildly successful, I mean a catastrophic failure of such epic proportions that it will be studied in military academies for the next 1,000 cycles as what not to do. A murmur rippled through the council chamber. The Supreme Leader, Bargath the Magnificent, leaned forward on his crystalline throne. Admiral Krax-Vorn, you will maintain proper decorum in these chambers. Decorum? Decorum? Krax-Vorn laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed off the chamber walls. With all due respect, Supreme Leader, decorum won't bring back our 883 ships. Decorum won't resurrect our fallen warriors. And decorum certainly won't explain how a species that still burns fossil fuels and thinks reality entertainment shows are the pinnacle of culture managed to obliterate the finest fleet in the known universe. The Council's chief strategist, Nolara Vex, cleared her throat. Admiral, perhaps you could enlighten us on exactly what went wrong. Our intelligence indicated that these humans were at least 3 technological epochs behind us. Their military capabilities were assessed as primitive at best. Oh yes, our intelligence. Krax-Vorn waved one of his upper arms dismissively, while the lower ones called up more holographic images, smoldering wrecks of Zendari battlecruisers, shattered orbital platforms, and one particularly humiliating image of a Zendari attack ship being towed by something called a Ford F-150. Our comprehensive intelligence. Tell me, strategist Vex, did our intelligence mention that humans can turn literally anything into a weapon? Did it mention their bizarre ability to function? No. Is to thrive in conditions of absolute chaos? Did anyone bother to consider that a species that spends its leisure time watching simulations of its own destruction might actually be prepared for it? The Grand Archivist Tulok Bem adjusted his sensory enhancers. Admiral, are you suggesting our intelligence division was incompetent? Incompetent? No, that would be a compliment. Krax-Vorn pulled up another hologram, this one showing a human child with a small electronic device. This is what our intelligence division classified as primitive communication technology. What they failed to recognize is that this small human was playing a game called Galactic Invaders, Ultimate Defense. A game that, as it turns out, perfectly simulated our actual attack strategies. We didn't just telegraph our punches. We sent an engraved invitation with the time, date, and refreshment options. The chamber fell silent as the council members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Krax-Vorn continued, his voice quieter now but no less intense. We were told they were divided, fragmented into thousands of competing factions, unable to form a unified defense. We were told their weapons were crude, their tactics predictable, their resolve weak. He paused, fixing each council member with his gaze. What we weren't told is that humans unite when threatened. We weren't told that they've been rehearsing for an alien invasion through their entertainment media for over a century. And we certainly weren't told that they consider adaptability a survival trait. Krax-Vorn slumped slightly, the weight of the disaster visible in his posture. 9,900 ships we sent, though the pride of our empire. The greatest armada ever assembled, 9,900, and I stand before you the commander of the 17 that crawled back. He straightened up again, all 4 eyes blazing. So forgive me, Supreme Leader, if my decorum seems lacking. But I've spent the last 30 cycles watching humans turn our superior technology into scrap metal, and I've earned the right to be a little testy. Supreme Leader Bargath stroked his ceremonial whiskers thoughtfully. Perhaps, Admiral, you should start at the beginning. Tell us about the initial intelligence assessment. Oh yes, Krax-Vorn nodded, a bitter smile spreading across his face. Let me tell you all about our flawless intelligence. Let me tell you about Science Officer Peltar and his brilliant analysis. Science Officer Peltar. Krax-Vorn spat the name like it was a bitter toxin. The most decorated xenobiologist in the Empire. The genius who assured us that humans were, and I quote, barely more evolved than their primate cousins, with a puzzling fascination for devices that go boom. That same Peltar who is now conveniently missing in action. Krax-Vorn pulled up a hologram showing a tall, thin Zendari with oversized cranial lobes and an expression of perpetual academic superiority. This is the brilliant mind who concluded that humans would surrender after a single demonstration of our vastly superior firepower. The same brilliant mind who dismissed their global communication network as, let me find his exact words, yes, a primitive repository of cat images and fertility rituals. What Peltar failed to realize is that humans use this primitive network to share information at speeds we can't even comprehend. They went from complete ignorance of our existence to developing countermeasures against our cloaking technology in less than 30 Earth hours. The Minister of Scientific Advancement, Grenlog Pym, raised a tentative appendage. But surely, Admiral, our technological advantage was insurmountable. Their most advanced weapons systems rely on combustion and basic projectiles. Krax-Vorn barked out a laugh that contained zero humor. Oh, Minister Pym, how I wish you'd been there to explain that to the humans. They might have died laughing instead of shooting down our ships. He stomped over to the holographic display and pulled up new images, crude human vehicles with hastily mounted energy weapons, clearly salvaged from downed Zendari fighters. You see this? This is what happens when you underestimate human adaptability. They didn't just use their existing weapons, they reverse-engineered ours. In days. While Peltar was busy writing scholarly papers about how humans were technologically stagnant, they were turning our own weapons against us. Supreme Leader Bargath frowned, but our intelligence reports contained extensive analysis of their military capabilities. Yes, based on their conventional forces. Krax-Vorn's eye stalks quivered with frustration. What Peltar and his team of so-called experts failed to understand is that human warfare isn't just about their standing armies. It's about their capacity to adapt, to improvise, to throw out the rulebook and write a new one in the middle of battle. He tapped his wrist device, and the display showed humans in civilian clothing, fighting alongside uniformed soldiers. And this is what humans call civilian resistance. Peltar assured us that non-military humans would be cowering in their dwellings, paralyzed by fear. Instead, they grabbed whatever weapons they could find and joined the fight. We had farmers shooting down scout ships with hunting weapons. We had adolescent humans hacking our communication systems. A group of what they call weekend mechanics captured an entire assault walker and Joy rode it through one of their cities. The security minister Drox Kall looked horrified. But what about their entertainment transmissions? Our analysts spent years studying them. Surely they provided insight into human behavior? Krax-Vorn's already purple face darkened several shades. Ah, yes. The entertainment transmissions. Peltar's team classified them as, and again I quote, fictional fantasies with no bearing on actual human capabilities or intentions. Fictional fantasies. He jabbed at his control pad, and the hologram shifted to show scenes from human movies alongside actual battle footage from Earth. The similarities were disturbing. These weren't fantasies. They were rehearsals. Every invasion scenario, every alien encounter, every last-minute desperate plan they've been mentally preparing for centuries. While we were dismissing their Independence Day and battle, Los Angeles as primitive entertainment, they were running simulations of exactly how to defeat us. Krax-Vorn paused, breathing heavily, all four of his arms gesturing in exasperation. Peltar's team watched thousands of hours of humans enthusiastically imagining how they would defeat superior alien forces, and concluded that this indicated nothing about their actual psychology or capabilities. The humans have a saying, life imitates art. In this case, their art was a blueprint for our destruction. The council chamber remained silent for several moments, the magnitude of the intelligence failure sinking in. But perhaps the most catastrophic error, Krax-Vorn continued, his voice suddenly quiet, was underestimating human unpredictability. Peltar's models predicted rational responses, organized resistance, conventional tactics. What we got instead was chaos. Beautiful, terrible, effective chaos. Humans don't follow the rules of engagement. They don't even follow their own rules. They adapt, they improvise, they overcome, and they do it with a disturbing amount of enthusiasm. He looked up at the council, his eyes haunted. They don't just fight to survive. They fight to win, and Peltar never saw that coming. So there we were. Krax-Vorn continued, pacing the chamber floor with the practiced stride of a veteran commander, positioning our first wave of 2,000 ships in what our tactical manuals describe as the overwhelming force formation. According to Battle Admiral Morvax's calculations, this should have resulted in immediate surrender or, at worst, token resistance easily crushed within 6 planetary rotations. He paused, looking at each council member in turn. Would you like to guess how long it actually took for things to go catastrophically wrong? Go ahead. Guess. The military minister Krax-Vorn cleared his throat uncomfortably. Based on standard invasion protocols, perhaps 2 Earth days? Krax-Vorn's laugh was hollow. 2 Earth minutes. We hadn't even completed our intimidation alignment when the humans launched their first counterattack. He tapped his command pad, and a series of images appeared showing Zendari battlecruisers under attack from swarms of small, hastily modified Earth vehicles. These aren't military craft. This is what humans call a crop duster, a primitive flying machine designed to spray chemicals on their food plants. Except they removed the spraying equipment and strapped on, well, everything. Projectile weapons, explosive devices, and in one particularly creative case, a massive electromagnetic pulse generator cobbled together from what we later learned was a microwave oven and parts from something called Radio Shack. The council collectively leaned forward to examine the images with expressions of disbelief. And these, Krax-Vorn continued, displaying another series of images, are what humans call monster trucks, recreational vehicles they use for entertainment. Within hours, they had attached armor plating and mounted weapons to breach the perimeter defenses of our ground bases. The commander of Base Theta 9 reported being overrun by vehicles called Grave Digger and Maximum Destruction before his transmission was cut off. Supreme Leader Bargath frowned deeply, but our energy shields were calibrated to repel military-grade weapons. Krax-Vorn interrupted, his frustration evident. Not a school bus filled with fertilizer explosive driven by a human shouting yippee-ki-yay at the top of his respiratory system. He collapsed into the testimony chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Within the first Earth day, we lost 218 ships. Not to their military. Not to sophisticated defense systems. To farmers and mechanics, and something called the Texas National Guard who apparently train for fun on weekends. The council chamber fell silent, processing this information, and by the 3rd day, Krax-Vorn continued, his voice quieter now, we realized we were facing something unprecedented. Human resistance wasn't centralized. It wasn't coordinated in any way we could understand. It was everywhere. They have this concept they call guerrilla warfare, hit and run attacks, ambushes, sabotage. We'd secure an area, declare it pacified, move on, and suddenly find our supply lines cut by locals armed with hunting weapons and improvised explosives. He pulled up new images showing Zendari troops confused and surrounded in urban environments. Our troops were trained for traditional battlefield situations. Form up, advance, conquer. But humans? They don't fight that way. They'd snipe at us from hidden positions, then disappear into tunnel networks. They'd let us take a building, then bring it down on our heads. One group lured an entire battalion into a sports arena, then released what they called an angry bull into the ranks. Do you know what a bull is? I do now. It's half a ton of muscle and horn and bad attitude. Krax-Vorn shuddered visibly at the memory. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery, he continued, lowering his voice as if sharing a terrible secret, was that humans actually enjoy combat. They don't just endure it as a necessary evil. They don't resign themselves to it as an unfortunate duty. They love it. He displayed footage of humans cheering as they successfully took down Zendari craft, celebrating victories with bizarre rituals involving raised appendages and spraying fermented beverages. This footage is from their own communications network. They were sharing techniques for defeating us. They created what they call memes about our invasion. While we were struggling to maintain morale, they were turning our attempts to conquer them into entertainment. The military minister looked physically ill. But how is this possible? No species we've encountered reacts this way to warfare. That's because. Krax-Vorn replied grimly. Most species don't spend their entire evolutionary history fighting themselves. Humans have been waging war on each other since they figured out how to pick up rocks. They've developed and refined the art of killing for millennia. And when we arrived, we just gave them a new opponent, new toys, and a common enemy to unite against. He gestured to an image of a grinning human standing atop a downed Zendari scout ship, triumphantly waving a piece of fabric attached to a stick. They have a saying, messing with Earth is hazardous to your health. I think we should have that engraved on a plaque somewhere in this chamber, as a reminder. As if our initial losses weren't humiliating enough. Krax-Vorn continued, his voice growing hoarse. The humans then moved from defense to offense. And that, esteemed council members, is when things went from catastrophic to apocalyptic. He activated a new hologram showing Zendari ships firing on each other in Earth orbit. By the end of the first Earth week, humans had hacked into our communication systems. Did I mention that Officer Peltar assured us their computer technology was, and these are his exact words, charmingly rudimentary? Well, these rudimentary systems somehow managed to penetrate our quantum-encrypted networks within days. The technology minister, Elpar Zeev, gasped audibly. That's impossible. Our encryption algorithms were developed by the same geniuses who thought humans would surrender without a fight. Krax-Vorn snapped. But please, Minister Zeev, tell me more about how impossible it is while I show you footage of human hackers sending false targeting data to our fleet. The hologram shifted to show Zendari battlecruisers firing upon friendly ships. We lost 312 vessels before we could shut down the compromised systems. 312. To friendly fire. And do you know what the humans called this operation? They named it Uno Reverse Card. I still don't understand the reference, but every human who heard it found it hilarious. Krax-Vorn slumped slightly in his chair, clearly reliving the nightmare. Then came what they called Operation Mosquito. Perhaps the most aptly named military campaign I've ever witnessed. He pulled up new footage showing swarms of tiny Earth aircraft surrounding massive Zendari warships. You see, humans have these small recreational aircraft, completely unarmed, minimal technology, but they have thousands of them. The footage showed the small craft flying in intricate patterns around Zendari vessels. At first, we thought it was some bizarre suicide tactic. But then we realized they were targeting our sensor arrays. Our targeting systems couldn't lock onto so many small objects moving erratically. Our energy weapons were designed to hit capital ships, not these gnats. The security minister leaned forward. But surely they couldn't cause significant damage with such primitive craft. Krax-Vorn's laugh was bitter. They didn't need to cause damage. They just needed to blind us. And while our gunners were distracted trying to swat these irritants, their actual military forces were positioning for precision strikes against our engines and weapon systems. It was like being defeated by children throwing pebbles to distract you while someone else steals your hovercraft. He brought up another image of Zendari dreadnought listing in orbit, surrounded by hundreds of tiny craft. The flagship Eternal Dominance, pride of our fleet, disabled by weekend hobby pilots. Weekend hobby pilots. Do you have any idea how that feels to report? The ship that destroyed the Krelnar Armada brought down by humans who fly for fun when they're not fixing waste disposal units or teaching juvenile humans about mathematics. The council shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Krax-Vorn took a moment to compose himself. But perhaps the most humiliating aspect of their counteroffensive was the biological weapon fiasco. His voice dropped to an almost whisper. We thought ourselves so clever, sending boarding parties onto their orbital stations, and the elite commandos, the finest warriors in the Empire. He pulled up medical scans of Zendari soldiers, showing strange infections spreading through their respiratory systems. Within hours, our troops were incapacitated. Not by human weapons, not by sophisticated defenses, by microscopic organisms that humans carry in their bodies. Common cold viruses, rhinoviruses, influenza. Our medical officers were baffled. How could such primitive pathogens breach our advanced immune systems? The answer is simple. They've never encountered our biology before, and we had no defense. The medical minister, Trelanix, interjected, but our troops undergo complete pathogenic screening before encountering known threats. Krax-Vorn thundered. Earth has millions of viral and bacterial strains. Humans live with them daily. Their bodies are walking biological weapons laboratories. Some of our soldiers were incapacitated by something humans call cat dander. Cat dander. Do you know what that is? It's microscopic particles from their furry companion animals. Our fearsome warriors laid low by pet hair. He collapsed back into his seat, visibly exhausted. And then came Admiral Lorex's decision. The decision that sealed our fate. Krax-Vorn's voice became eerily calm. After losing nearly 1,000 ships in orbit, after the communication systems hack, after Operation Mosquito, after our boarding parties came back sneezing and coughing and covered in hives, Admiral Lorex decided that the best course of action was to deploy ground troops. The chamber fell completely silent. You're familiar with Admiral Lorex, yes? A decorated veteran of 17 planetary conquests? Tactical genius? The same Admiral Lorex who, upon analyzing the situation, declared, and I quote, "These primitives may have gotten lucky in space, but on the ground, our superior training and equipment will prevail." Krax-Vorn's laugh was hollow and haunting. We deployed 6 million ground troops across what humans call strategic locations, military bases, seats of government, critical infrastructure, all according to standard invasion protocol. He tapped his command pad one more time, bringing up a map of Earth with Zendari landing zones highlighted. What Admiral Lorex failed to consider is that humans don't follow standard anything. They didn't mass their forces to protect these locations. They didn't engage in traditional ground warfare. No, they let us land. They let us establish our bases. They let us think we were winning. His eyes darkened. And then they showed us the true meaning of the human concept called guerrilla warfare. The term, I've since learned, comes from human history. It means little war. But there was nothing little about what happened next. 3 Earth weeks after landing our ground forces, Krax-Vorn continued, his voice now barely above a whisper, we received Admiral Lorex's final transmission. He tapped his command pad, and audio filled the council chamber. This is Admiral Lorex. Base Epsilon has fallen. Base Gamma has fallen. Base Omega is under attack from all sides. The humans, they're everywhere. They don't sleep. They don't stop. They're using our own weapons against us. I'm ordering a full retreat. All forces, evacuate immediately. I repeat, evacuate immediately. The recording ended with sounds of explosions and something that sounded suspiciously like human laughter. That was the last we heard from Admiral Lorex. Krax-Vorn said, his voice hollow. The retreat wasn't a strategic withdrawal. It wasn't an organized redeployment. It was a rout, a desperate, chaotic scramble to escape a planet that had become a death trap for our forces. He displayed footage of Zindari troops actually running toward evacuation ships, pursued by humans in a bewildering array of vehicles. Look at them. The finest warriors in 17 systems, being from humans driving something called dune buggies and pickup trucks. Our battle doctrine has no protocol for this. There's no chapter in the tactical manual titled, "What to Do When Primitives Turn Your Advanced Technology into Scrap and Chase You with Farm Equipment." The military minister looked physically ill, but our orbital support was in shambles. Krax-Vorn shouted, slamming all four fists onto the table. By this point, we had lost over 7,000 ships. Our command structure had collapsed. Communication was compromised. And the humans were broadcasting what they called a countdown to kickoff on all our frequencies. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. Of our 6 million ground troops, fewer than 300,000 made it back to evacuation craft. And of the remaining 2,900 ships we had in orbit, only 17 managed to break through Earth's defenses and escape the system. The chamber fell deathly silent. 17 ships. 17. Out of 9,900. He let the number hang in the air. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or captured. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your mighty armada reduced to less than 0.2% of its original strength? By primitives? No one dared speak. The psychological impact on our survivors cannot be overstated, Krax-Vorn continued, his voice cracking. Many have had to be sedated. Some wake screaming in the night about monster trucks and something called the A-Team. Several high-ranking officers have requested memory-wiping procedures rather than live with the trauma of our defeat. He paused, seeming to debate whether to continue, then spoke in a much quieter voice. I myself was nearly captured during the evacuation. The admission clearly pained him. My shuttle was shot down over an area humans call Nebraska. I had to traverse 17 kilometers of hostile territory to reach the nearest extraction point. Krax-Vorn's eyes took on a distant, haunted look. I was pursued by local defenders, not soldiers, but farmers, humans who grow plants for sustenance. They chased me across their fields in vehicles called tractors and combines. One of them nearly caught me with a tool they call a pitchfork, a primitive but remarkably effective implement with sharp metal prongs. He unconsciously touched a scar on his lower right arm. They were laughing, council members, laughing. As they chased me, a Fleet Admiral of the Zindari Empire, through their muddy fields. One of them, an elderly human female who couldn't have been less than 70 of their years, almost ran me down with something called an ATV. All while shouting what I later learned was a traditional Earth battle cry, "Get off my property, you purple son of a bitch." Krax-Vorn slumped in his chair, the memory clearly painful. I was rescued, barely, by one of our few remaining scout ships, as we escaped Earth's atmosphere. I watched through the viewport as humans celebrated below. They were having parties, festivities, in the middle of the greatest war their species had ever faced. They were celebrating while we simply tried to survive. He looked up at the council, his eyes haunted but resolute. 17 ships, council members. 17 ships limped home from what was supposed to be a routine conquest, each carrying the same message. Earth is not to be trifled with. Humans are not to be underestimated. And I would rather face the firing squad for cowardice than ever return to that nightmare of a planet again. A heavy silence hung over the Supreme Council chamber as Krax-Vorn finished his account. The magnitude of the disaster, the loss of nearly 10,000 ships and millions of Zindari lives, was almost incomprehensible. Supreme Leader Bargath was the first to speak, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. In 16,000 cycles of the Zindari Empire, we have never experienced a defeat of this magnitude. With respect, Supreme Leader Krax-Vorn replied, we have never encountered a species like humans before. The military minister, Krax-Vorn, leaned forward. What would you recommend, Admiral? A second invasion force. Perhaps with biological weapons too. No, Krax-Vorn's outburst shocked the Council. Forgive me, Minister, but have you heard nothing I've said? A second invasion wouldn't just fail, it would be suicide. Give humans more of our technology to reverse engineer, more of our tactics to adapt to, more of our weaknesses to exploit? He straightened, regaining his composure. If there is one lesson to be learned from this catastrophe, it's that humans possess a trait unique among all species we've encountered: adaptive unpredictability. They don't just react, they innovate. They don't just resist, they counterattack in ways we cannot anticipate. And they do it fast. The Council members exchanged troubled glances. My recommendation, Krax-Vorn continued firmly, is that we classify Sol system, and particularly Earth, as a forbidden zone of the highest order. No contact, no observation, no proximity within 3 light years. We should erase all navigational data leading to their system and enact the most severe penalties for any violation of this quarantine. The Science Minister frowned. But the technological and biological data we could gather is not worth the risk, Krax-Vorn interrupted. Even now, humans are dissecting our captured ships, analyzing our technology, adapting it to their purposes. The 17 vessels that escaped detected unusual energy signatures as we fled, signatures consistent with early attempts at replicating our faster-than-light drives. He let that sink in before continuing. Within 10 cycles, humans won't just be capable of defending their world. They'll be capable of leaving it. And if you think they were dangerous confined to one planet, imagine them with the ability to pursue us across the stars. Supreme Leader Bargath stroked his ceremonial whiskers thoughtfully before nodding. The Council will vote, but I believe we are in agreement. Earth is hereby designated Forbidden Zone Alpha 1. All records of our encounter will be classified at the highest level. He fixed Krax-Vorn with a penetrating gaze. Is there anything else the Council should know, Admiral? Krax-Vorn hesitated, then spoke with grim finality. Just one thing, Supreme Leader. In my last moments on Earth, as I was fleeing those farmers, I observed a human juvenile placing a sign next to a destroyed Zindari tank. The sign read, "Come back and we'll finish the job." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each Council member in turn. I believe them.